From murdering his own fan to a mystery not solved to this day, these are rappers, singers who have killed someone. When it comes to murder, we have to talk about someone living up to his name. That's right, we're talking about C Murder, aka C Miller. Did you know that he's a brother of Master P and Sick the Shocker? Yup, true story. His real name is Corey Miller. His brothers' names are Percy Miller, aka Master P, and Vishon Miller, aka Sick the Shocker. Crazy stuff. The three were signed to No Limits Records, which doesn't exist anymore.
Cash Money now speaks highly of both.
Oh yeah,
the
thing about Mystical, if I was at the time, I just got back into the music thing because music is a feeling for me.
And the three were very popular artists throughout the 90s. The murder conviction of Percy is somewhat perplexing. Witnesses had some pretty shaky testimony. For instance, one key witness for the prosecution, Darnielle Jordan Sr., said that he was absolutely positive C Murder shot 16-year-old Steve Thomas in a nightclub near New Orleans. But there's only one problem. Under cross-examination, he said he didn't see a gun at all. Darnielle said he was working as a security guard at a club when a huge fight broke out, and he ran over to try to break it up. Instead of the fight calming down, Corey allegedly went under the group of 15 to 20 people who were hitting Thomas and shot him. When Corey's defense attorney cross-examined Darnielle, he said he didn't see C Murder with a gun, and that he actually never saw a gun at all that night.
Do you feel like you failed your brother?
No, to be honest with you. I always try to remove C from that bad environment.
One of the weirdest parts about this case is that the victim looked up to the rapper that allegedly shot him. The victim's father, George Thomas, said his son was an avid fan of baseball and basketball, but his real dream was to become a rapper like the three brothers in No Limit. That's just brutal to be killed by your idol. But wait, you might be asking yourself, this is a club. He's 16 years old. How did he get in? Well, prosecutor Wolf in the second trial said he used a fake ID and had a gold foil on his teeth, which was apparently enough to fool the bouncer to allow him entry. If the bouncer had simply done his job, the boy would be alive today. It still isn't known why they started fighting in the first place, but the victim ended up on the ground getting pummeled by a ton of people. It was then that Wolf said Miller reached in with a .38 revolver and shot him in the chest.
Simply go out to everybody that lost a child. When you look at this, and I said, I'm gonna turn my pain into passion.
Despite being close to 400 people in the building, most had scattered due to the gunshot by the time the police got on the scene. Only one witness, the security guard, said that he saw what happened, and he later changed his story. But just when you thought things couldn't get any sketchier with this case, well, they did. The gun was never found. Two more witnesses came forward, though, and said Miller was the trigger man. The defense said the physical evidence implicating C Murder was flimsy at best, and that the witnesses weren't credible because they couldn't possibly have seen what happened during the chaotic melee. Nonetheless, Miller was convicted of second-degree murder and subsequently sentenced to life in prison. Clearly, the judge had no mercy when he sentenced C Murder. Speaking of no mercy, our next musical artist killed his girlfriend. I'm talking about John Simon Ritchie, aka Sid Vicious. From the Sex Pistols, this case is downright mysterious for more than a few reasons. The enigma of being an old case that was never truly investigated by the police makes this story an easy target for rumor and speculation. The case has gone from a murder-suicide to a failed double suicide to someone else being the killer, causing many people to have tons of theories about the killing. The events leading up to the 1978 murder of Nancy Spungen, Sid's girlfriend, are no mystery though. Sid and Nancy's relationship was filled with drug use, and things could be highly volatile. Sid himself was a self-admitted drug abuser and had a huge problem with heroin. And when Nancy entered his life in 1977, his spiral down the addiction rabbit hole kicked into high gear. The two met for the first time in London when Nancy was following Johnny Thunders and Jerry Nolan of the Heartbreakers. Lee Childers, the Heartbreakers tour manager, noticed Sid starting to go out of control with Nancy and says she was a junkie, a drug supplier, an all-around lowlife.
I mean, we got dragged into Madison Square Garden against our will often, but we wanted to really go into the clubs and do the beginning bands and everything.
She was a very, very, very bad influence on people who were already a mess. She was a troublemaker and a stirrer-upper, and Sid definitely was a mess. The website for the Pistols openly states that Vicious was causing a lot of trouble for the band, be it infighting or his drug addiction. It got so bad, his behavior was causing trouble with their music tour back in 1978. Nils Stevenson, the Sex Pistols tour manager, said that Sid started being openly hostile to everyone and disliked everything except heroin and Nancy. It all came to a head after one last show in January 1978, and the rest of the band had had enough. They broke it up for good. Nancy shared a lot of traits with Vicious, and she was never shy about admitting her faults. In fact, she embraced them.
Yes, I'll make you a cup of coffee. But will you try and wake up, please? Because we gave him an interview.
I'll
and he
do
wanted to
it.
give him a good interview.
She didn't care if people thought of her as a groupie at all. I mean, that was the entire core of the punk genre in that era. Not to care what people think about you and flip the bird to the entire world. And these two encapsulated that idea perfectly. The night before the murder on October 11th, 1978 is rife with intrigue because nobody knows what actually happened. Visitors of the Chelsea Hotel, where the couple was living since August, said they saw Sid take up to 30 pills. These pills were called Tuinal and are a much less prescribed barbiturate in the modern era. That dose would have killed most people. Then sometime after 2 in the morning, after Vicious woke up from being nearly comatose from those pills, he called his bodyguard, Rocket's Red Glare, and told him to go get more pills, this time opioid painkillers. About 5 hours later, a nearby guest in the room adjacent to Sid's said he heard some female moans. At 10 in the morning, Vicious called the front desk begging for help. It was at this time that Nancy was dead, having bled to death from being stabbed in the stomach with a knife. Sid Vicious was arrested while he stumbled around the hallways of the hotel. He confessed to the crime immediately, but during later interviews, he said he was sleeping when it all happened. In a very creepy interview before his death, he said it was meant to happen because Nancy always said she would die before she was 21.
And what do you think made it happen?
It was meant to happen. Nancy always said she'd die before she was 21.
Sid Vicious would never stand trial for the murder, though. He died from a heroin overdose only a few months later. The series of events and circumstances that surrounded the murder of Nancy Spungen has raised a lot of questions. Because they had such an intense relationship, many people speculate it was a failed double suicide.
Do you really think you can buy Sid off of me?
Others think it was Sid's bodyguard, Red Glare, that killed Nancy. Unfortunately, we may never know, as the person that knows the situation best took it to the grave. There you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Those were rappers and singers who have killed someone.